The first dodo walked toward humans with curiosity, not fear. The sailors killed it instantly. As more dodos gathered around their fallen companion, they too were slaughtered. Years later, wild pigs invaded the island, devouring the dodo's unprotected eggs. In less than 75 years, a species that had survived for millions of years was gone forever.
The year is 1598. A fleet of Dutch merchant ships, battered by the unforgiving storms of the Indian Ocean, is desperately searching for salvation. The sailors aboard are starving, exhausted, and suffering from scurvy. They are far from their home, navigating the treacherous waters of the spice trade route under the command of Vice Admiral Wybrandt von Warwick. Through the thick sea mist, they spot a shadow on the horizon. It is a volcanic island, densely carpeted in lush, untouched ebony forests. This island, which they would claim and name Mauritius, has been isolated from the rest of the world for millions of years. It is a pristine paradise, a biological time capsule where mammals do not exist, and fear is an entirely alien concept. The starving men lower their rowboats and make landfall, their muskets loaded, expecting to fight tooth and nail for fresh meat and water. Instead, they step into a scene that defies everything they know about the natural world. As the men hack their way through the dense tropical underbrush, they hear a soft, rhythmic rustling. Emerging from the shadows of the ancient trees comes a creature straight out of a fever dream. It is a massive bird, standing over 3 feet tall and weighing a staggering 50 pounds. It has a robust, bluish-gray body, a tuft of curly white feathers on its rear, tiny, useless wings, and a massive hooked beak that looks menacing, but is used only to crack open fallen palm seeds. But the most shocking part of this encounter is not the bird's bizarre appearance, it is what the bird does next. The creature does not run. It does not fly away. It cannot fly. Instead, it looks at the strange, unwashed human invaders with large, curious eyes and simply waddles right up to them. It has never seen a predator in its entire evolutionary history. It assumes these two-legged beings are just another friendly resident of the forest. The Dutch sailors, desperate and starving, do not hesitate. They reach out and strike the bird on the head. The creature falls, offering zero resistance. Seeing this, more of the giant birds emerge from the brush, curious about the commotion, waddling over to their fallen companion to see what has happened. The sailors cook the meat, expecting a feast, but quickly discover a cruel irony. The meat of this magnificent, trusting creature is incredibly tough, greasy, and difficult to digest. They name the creature Walgvogel, which translates to disgusting bird or nauseating fowl. Yet, despite the terrible taste, the men continue to kill them out of sheer convenience. The bird's trusting nature is mistaken for stupidity, and the Portuguese word Dodo, meaning simpleton or fool, eventually evolves into the name we know today, the dodo. To truly understand the tragedy of the dodo, we have to look back millions of years before this fateful encounter. The dodo was not an evolutionary failure. In fact, it was a masterpiece of adaptation. Long before humans walked the earth, a flock of ancient pigeons flying over the Indian Ocean was blown off course by a massive storm. They landed on the newly formed volcanic island of Mauritius. For these pigeons, it was heaven on earth. The island was bursting with fruit, nuts, and clean water. There were no wolves, no big cats, no snakes, and absolutely no reason to fly away. Over millions of years, the forces of evolution shaped these ancient pigeons into the dodo. Because flight takes an enormous amount of energy, the birds slowly lost the ability to fly altogether. Their wings shrank into tiny decorative appendages. Their breastbones, no longer needing to support massive flight muscles, grew smaller. Their bodies grew larger and heavier to store fat for the dry seasons. They developed powerful, thick legs to roam the forest floor and a massive, specialized beak to crush the tough seeds of the tambalakok tree. Most importantly, their reproductive cycle adapted to this peaceful Eden. Because there were no predators to steal their eggs, the dodo abandoned the safety of the high canopy. The females laid only one single egg at a time, directly on the forest floor in a simple nest made of palm leaves. Both the mother and father would take turns fiercely darting this single egg, investing all their energy into raising one chick at a time. In a world without danger, this strategy was perfectly sustainable. The dodo was the undisputed king of Mauritius. It was a pigeon that had abandoned the skies to conquer the earth, thriving in a delicate, perfectly balanced ecosystem. But this perfect balance was about to be shattered in a way the dodo could never have anticipated. But let me ask you to pause and think for a moment. Have you ever wondered how an entire species spread across an island could be completely wiped off the face of the earth in just a few decades, especially a species that humans didn't even like to eat? The sailors despised the taste of dodo meat, often boiling it for hours only to find it tough and nauseating. So if the humans weren't eating them to extinction, why did the dodo vanish so incredibly fast? How could a handful of passing ships dismantle millions of years of evolution in less than a single human lifetime? The truth is far more sinister than hungry sailors hunting them down. The real story of the dodo's extinction is a chilling lesson in biological warfare, and it completely changes the narrative you thought you knew. The true architects of the dodo's demise were not the Dutch sailors themselves, but the invisible army they brought with them. In 1644, the Dutch East India Company decided to establish a permanent colony on Mauritius. They did not just bring axes and building materials, they brought a floating menagerie of invasive species. As the ships docked, rats scuttled down the mooring ropes. The sailors deliberately released pigs, goats, and macaques into the wild to establish a reliable food supply for future voyages. They brought domestic dogs and cats to keep the rat populations in check. In the span of a few months, the predator-free paradise of Mauritius was flooded with some of the most aggressive, adaptable, and hungry mammals on the planet. For the dodo, this was an apocalyptic scenario. The bird possessed absolutely no defensive instincts against these new creatures. When a wild pig stumbled upon a dodo nest, the dodo did not know to run or hide. It would simply stand there, puffing out its chest, entirely helpless as the pig devoured its single precious egg. The macaques, intelligent and agile, easily outsmarted the heavy ground-dwelling birds, stealing eggs from right under their beaks. The feral dogs and cats hunted the young, vulnerable dodo chicks that had never learned to hide in the brush. The rats, multiplying by the thousands, swarmed the forest floor, eating the seeds, fruits, and insects that the dodo relied upon for survival. The dodo's evolutionary strategy, laying only one egg per year on the open ground, became its death sentence. Even if a pair of dodos managed to survive the dogs and the humans, their single egg was almost guaranteed to be eaten by a pig or a rat. The reproduction rate plummeted to zero. The population could not replenish itself. At the same time, the Dutch settlers began clearing the ancient ebony forests to build their settlements and plant crops, rapidly shrinking the dodo's natural habitat. The birds were pushed further and further into the harsh, unforgiving mountainous regions of the island, where food was scarce and the environment was hostile. The dodo was fighting a war on three fronts: habitat destruction, human hunting, and a relentless onslaught of invasive predators. It was a war the bird was genetically unequipped to fight. The timeline of their extinction is terrifyingly short. From the moment Vice Admiral von Warwick's men first laid eyes on the dodo in 1598, the countdown had begun. By the 1930s, the bird was becoming a rare sight on the island. By the 1950s, sightings were so infrequent that sailors began to speak of the bird in the past tense. The final, heartbreaking chapter of the dodo's story took place in 1662. A Dutch ship called the Arnhem shipwrecked off the coast of Mauritius. A survivor named Volkard Iverson, stranded with his crew, managed to make his way to a tiny coastal islet just off the main shore of Mauritius. This small spit of land had become a final refuge, a desperate Alamo for the last remaining dodos who had waded across the shallow water to escape the pigs and macaques on the mainland. Iverson wrote in his journal that they found a small group of the birds huddling together. Starving and desperate, the shipwrecked sailors easily caught them. When they grabbed one bird by the leg, it let out a distress cry, and the other dodos rushed forward to help their companion, only to be captured and killed as well. This 1662 encounter is widely considered by historians and scientists as the last definitively accepted sighting of a live dodo in the wild.
Less than 75 years, that is all it took. In the blink of an eye, a creature that had reigned over its island for millennia was completely erased from existence. But the tragedy does not end with the death of the last bird. The dodo vanished so quickly that the rest of the world barely had time to register that it existed. By the late 1700s and early 1800s, European scientists began to doubt the accounts of the Dutch sailors. Because there were no complete skeletons or living specimens in Europe, only a few sketches, scattered bones, and a dried head housed at Oxford University, the scientific community declared that the dodo was a myth. They believed the Dutch sailors had fabricated the story, categorizing the dodo as a fairy tale creature, alongside the griffin, the dragon, and the unicorn. It wasn't until 1865, when a massive collection of sub-fossil dodo bones was discovered in a swamp in Mauritius, that the world was forced to accept the uncomfortable truth. The bird was real, and humanity had completely destroyed it. The story of the dodo is not just a quirky historical anecdote about a funny-looking, clumsy bird. It is a profound, terrifying testament to the fragility of nature. The dodo was not stupid, it was specialized. It was perfectly adapted to a world without human interference, and its only crime was trusting us. It stands as the first widely recorded instance in human history where our actions directly and rapidly drove an entire species to extinction. It forced humanity to realize for the first time that we have the godlike power to permanently erase a species from the tapestry of life. Today, the dodo is an icon, a symbol of what we lose when we march blindly into untouched ecosystems. It serves as a haunting reminder that once a species is gone, no amount of regret can bring it back. If this tragic, shocking, true story changed the way you look at the dodo bird and the impact we have on our planet, make sure to hit that like button to support the channel. It really helps push these untold historical stories to a wider audience. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a deep dive into the fascinating, sometimes dark corners of our world's history. And I want to hear from you. Do you think modern conservation efforts are enough to stop the next dodo from happening, or are we still making the same mistakes? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.